Great.
You guys are awesome.
Good afternoon. This is the June 3rd of the Pmbc meeting. It's a special meeting to talk about recommendation to award 3 early procurement projects for the library. That would be site work, steel, and concrete. And I'm going to let John Lemieux lead off the discussion since he's got all the information. You're on mute.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me jump over to the GMP just so we can see that briefly. So as you are aware, we have been working with Commodore Builders to nail down the, we're in the process of nailing down the guaranteed maximum price for the project. And tonight we are here specifically to speak about the first 3 packages that work in concert with that overall GMP. And they are concrete, structural steel, and site work. Typically, these are the 3 packages that are put together to kind of get out of the gates on many projects. You know, in fact, 2 school projects we're doing right now, concrete, steel, and earthwork were the things that we did well in advance of the GMP just to get moving, especially because structural steel has a long lead time. Basically, you know, between the submittal and shop drawing process, that has to take place, and then the fabrication starts. So you want to get a jump on the steel so that by the time your earthwork and foundations are done, the steel is ready to be put up. So that's why we're here. So what we have for each of these 3 highlighted numbers, we received a letter of recommendation from Commodore. And I'll take you through it. It's a lot of information, but they are all the same, ultimately, same format. So as an example, we received this letter of recommendation from Commodore regarding the concrete scope of work, specifically the 2 spec sections regarding concrete, cast in place concrete, and concrete paving. I'll use the highlighter here. This is the total recommendation for award based on just the sub work. Okay, so or just the main subcontractor, who in this case is Marguerite Concrete. On top of that, down here, we have some other. We have the base contract scope for Marguerite. Okay, and then we have a couple of an allowance and a hold. Basically, as part of the process of developing a guaranteed maximum price, there are allowances for things that haven't been, the things that may or may not happen as the project proceeds, as well as holds, which are things that haven't been bought out yet. So they know as part of this concrete package, they're going to have an allowance for temporary bracing and a hold for the washout area. Basically, that means every time the concrete comes to the job site, they dump the load into the footing or foundation or floor slab. There's always that little bit of washout that takes place. You know, they hose off the inside of the truck, then the guy dumps it. He doesn't want your concrete getting stuck in his truck, and they don't want him to bring it back to the facility. So what happens is that gets dumped out somewhere on site. They have to pay to get rid of that. So this is a hold for that work that will take place later on. Further in the process, or in the document, I should say, there are the assumptions and clarifications for each of these. And again, these are reviewed by the architect to make sure things aren't missed. As an example here, we'll go through them all here to give you an example, but you know, we won't have to go through all of them for the others. As an example, they exclude independent QA/QC testing. So even though they will coordinate it, basically that means when the independent lab is called to do a concrete cylinder to confirm that the compressive strength of the concrete, let's say it's designed to be 4,000 PSI, they take concrete cylinders and then those are tested. This is just that Commodore's way of saying, we don't own the cost of that, and we agree with that. We have that somewhere else on the project budget. They don't have any concrete mock-ups. There's none called for. They don't carry any sealants because that's by other scopes. Other concrete items such as signage for flagpoles, the bollards, light pole bases, those are by the site work contractor, so they exclude those. For the insulation under the slab, they say we carry the horizontal, and then the vertical is carried by someone else. So that's all of the pink foam board insulation that you see before the project before the slab goes in. They lay all of that down, the slab goes on top of it. And then when they dig the foundation, before they backfill it, they put insulation on the outside of the wall too to help insulate the building. And then a specific update about patio concrete and what they carried. So at the end of that, you know, it's signed by Commodore. We will sign it, and the PBC will sign it. Behind that, you get their bid tab, so you get to see the price difference, and you can see here, you know, Marguerite really took a run at the job because you can see the difference in pricing between the other two and the low. And then it's followed by their actual bid, so that we have that on record. So I know that's a lot of information, but this is how these trades that are brought forward outside of the GMP are discussed. Yes.
If you go down on that further, the clarifications on in exclusions there.
Yep.
Is that stuff all? If they do something, it's going to be extra money on that?
Well, Bob, it's a good question. This stuff is more them confirming that it's not theirs. You know, so they don't own QAQC, so that wouldn't be an issue. That's we have a line item for $30,000 in the budget for that. Mock-ups, they just specifically saying they don't own it. Sealants are by others. The other items down there are by the site work guy. They're clarifying what they do for insulation. So there really should be nothing here. This is all stuff that should be bought under other items and other trades. So that's part of, you know, when Phil takes a look at this too, he wants to make sure insulation is carried. So he knows that this guy doesn't have it. And we also don't want you to buy it twice. You know, we don't want two guys carrying it, because then ultimately then we're fighting over a credit later for something we shouldn't have bought in the first place.
Yeah, I mentioned to Steve about the winter protection there, and he said that's covered in a different location.
So if the job right now, you know, for June, you know, for winter, you know, in my mind, this job, depending on the schedule, likely doesn't have winter concrete. You know, this concrete's going to be in August, you know, well in advance of any concern about winter concrete on this. Now for masonry, when we get to, you know, when we ultimately see the stuff for masons, that's part of the GMP package, you know, I'm sure in the masonry section, that's a trade contractor or a filed subbidder, you know, that was put in there for them to own it. So it's a good question. But I think we're covered here in this site work, in this concrete category.
Mm-hmm.
John, what are the assumptions and clarifications in Commodore's letter what governs, or in Marguerite's? Because Marguerite has a lot more than Commodore does.
That's a great question. I'm going to tell you that what's in Commodore's letter is kind of dictates.
There's some stuff in Marguerite's that's a little concerning, but Commodore doesn't bring it up. So I don't know if Commodore has flushed that out with Marguerite, or...
I would tell you that yes, they have flushed it out. So for anybody that has, so there's two types of bidders on this work. There are trade bidders, and then there are non-trades. What you're seeing tonight are non-trades, and the discussion is a lot more in depth, because for the trade bidders, if it's on the drawings, you own it. If it's not on the drawings, you don't own it. But when you deal with the non-trade subs, like concrete, steel, and earthwork, you really get kind of, when you get quotes, you get an apple and an orange, you know, and a grapefruit. You know, it's all fruit. It all has to do with concrete, but different guys carry different things. And part of the process that has taken place since we dealt with them, or I should say, since the bids were due, is Commodore has kind of gone through and washed through all of the all those differences, had scope buyout meetings, and understood who has what, so that when they show us that bid tab, we understand that we're getting the, you know, apple to apple to apple comparison of bidders.
All right. So a couple of things. Can you go back up, just back up real quick to the scope?
Yep.
A couple of things that were concerning that, Marguerite's scope there.
Marguerite scope. Yep.
Yeah. Just on pads, has that been fully, the pads seem a little light. 6 housekeeping pads and 2 HVAC pads. I haven't fully gone through the scope to determine that, but is that just what's shown on the concrete drawings, or have they actually gone through HVAC and plumbing drawings to make sure they have pads for all the units and pumps that need pads? It just doesn't seem like enough.
Yeah, let me make a little note here. I am going to tell you that Phil ran through all of these.
Yep.
And was in support of the recommendation. But Brian, I will make sure that, you know, before this gets, you know, just for the process overall, as a stop for a second, this gets approved tonight. Then what will happen is we'll put together a change order, because although, you know, this is the authorization to move ahead, ultimately we still need a change order document to memorialize and make this a part of their contract. Yep. And, you know, any final questions or concerns, you know, we'll do that before, you know, before we hand this back off and say, okay, you're good to go for that number.
Okay. So that was one item. And then the other one I had that was 2 things that I always have been burned on in the past are pads and penetrations. So if you go to the exclusions, down a little further. So number 5, they say no BIM modeling, CAD files, or as-built drawings included, which to me tells me they're not planning on coordinating penetrations with the MEP trades, which is, I would think, a problem. That should be kind of standard fare.
One thing that Commodore is making all of their subcontractors, including the filed subcontractors, I believe it's part of their Exhibit B, is that they require the BIM coordination of all of their subs, including the filed sub bids.
Okay. But Marguerite's saying they specifically exclude that, so we should, I guess, clarify that, just because, sure. And I don't know if there's a standard bar detail for duct and pipe penetrations, but that's one thing that can add up pretty quick if they're not looking fully through the MEP drawings.
No, that's it's a good question, Brian. We'll make sure we follow up with that with Phil and with both Phils, Phil Balboni and Phil O'Brien.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions on concrete before we move on to steel? Okay, hearing none. Okay, structural steel. Includes structural steel and structural deck. This is Quinn Brothers of Essex. Let me do the highlighter here. This is the base bid right here. And then we have a number of holds and allowances. Beam penetrations, again, if you don't have to do them, we're not paying for them. Uniform fire watch, this is something they put in. We don't think they're going to have to do this. Usually what this is after this GCCM is on site and working, they will have a meeting with the fire chief, convince the fire chief that the superintendent that they have is qualified to, you know, watch the work and be that fire watch. Because otherwise, this is a set aside for details anytime they're doing hot work.
Just to clarify, it's the deputy fire chief. We got in hot water on that a couple of weeks ago.
The deputy fire chief.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Plan review.
Yes.
So this would be the kind of thing that we would hope we don't have to spend The safety rails, basically the structural steel guy will put up the safety rails, they'll finish their erection and they'll leave. But at the end of the day, those rails have to be taken down. That could be months after they demobilize. So it's easier for the CM to carry a scope hold number to take this stuff down later on, have someone come through and, torch the steel off. And similarly for touch-up paint on the steel. With all of these things, with the allowances and the holds, again, just so the committee's aware, these are buckets of money that we will be monitoring as the project moves ahead on a weekly basis. We'll understand what holds and allowances they're touching. On a monthly basis, we will see that billing as part of the requisition. For anybody who's ever seen a CM at risk backup package of detail, it's, on a design bid build job like the fire station, you get one rec. On the CM at risk job, you get copies of everybody's rec that roll up to the main rec. You get all of a breakdown for the general conditions that are being billed, the general requirements, allowance items, hold items. So it's, it's a much more involved process. It is all open book, so we will get a chance to see and comment on all of it. So just so you know, that just because we authorize these 4 items as an example beyond the base scope, Brian and, our folks in the field will be, monitoring that on an ongoing regular basis, day to day, month to month.
So as John pointed out earlier, in an earlier conversation, CM at risk is kind of a misnomer because all these holds and allowances, constitute their risk.
CM at no risk, basically.
No risk. That's it.
Basically, if they blow a buyout on something or you're still paying for it, but it's good for just like you had the question, Brian, about penetrations. We're happy to see that they put something in there for the railings and put something in there for the touch-up paint, because those are things that in this scope of work will happen after the fact, and someone goes, well, who's paying for that? So we'd rather see it and not have them not use it than have it not be there, and then it eats away at a contingency that we thought was bigger than it was. So again, here's the again, that's clarifications. Scroll down a little here. Oh, that's it. They didn't give us the backup on this one.
Yeah, so John, that was one of my comments to Steve. If they could provide the backup for this one too, just because, like we saw in the concrete, it doesn't always agree.
Consistency. Yep.
Brian did send that over, and I forwarded that out to everybody.
Okay, great.
You may not have seen it.
All right. And the only this one's more minor, but the only other thing I would recommend maybe is on the beam pen allowance. If we could get a, it's small dollars, so it's not a huge deal, but if they could provide a unit price for beam pens, or even a couple different sizes of beam pens, just because that allowance won't get us very far if they tell us after the fact that it's $2,000 for a 4-inch penetration or something like that.
Good point.
Okay. Moving on to site work. Site work, this is MJ Cataldo. As you can see, this was this is probably the one that most elicited, aside from steel needing to do shop drawings, this one from the buyout standpoint, this was a good, we need this for the budget. This guy was $300,000 under. Obviously, he's local. That's a good thing.
But just to be clear, he was under the next bidder, but he was on budget.
Correct. So we talked about here, and here we have a much larger set of items. You've got site work, you've got a test pit allowance, you've got a scope hold for debris management, removal of existing fill, installation of steel bollards, dust control, street sweeping, development of the SWIP, and a savings number of the contingency, which I'm not quite sure why they have that still in here. This is one thing I need to discuss with them. But ultimately, pretty straightforward what all of these items are. And they're we're happy to have, we're happy to have it. As far as exclusions and assumptions, again, the testing agency, which is fine. Clarifying that in this case, the concrete footings for the signage, flagpole, bollards, light pole bases are by the site guys, so they were excluded by concrete. They're included by site work. Talking about the vertical insulation that was in theirs, is their scope, but the underslab horizontal is by concrete. That's good. So it's good to see that the two packages are working kind of in reciprocity to each other. Discussion about clean soil, disposal of the excavated Japanese knotweed to an in-state landfill is included. That was important to make sure that that was in there. Any hazardous or contaminated materials are excluded. So obviously if we find a buried drum or some dirty dirt, they don't own that, which is fine. Any open rock removal is excluded. Infrared paving at Shattuck Street is excluded. Let's see. On-site excavated materials have been included for utility trench backfill. Importing clean run bank gravel has not been included. An allowance of $5,000 has been included for additional test pits that were recommended in the geotech report.
John, to be clear on that $1,900, what that was is to the overrun that we had to make the 1.513 number match exactly to what was shown in the second version of their GMP. So they must have worked on the Exhibit B a little bit more to the point where there was a $1,900 delta, and they considered that savings to the contingency.
So they're going to put that $1,900 into the CM contingency.
Correct.
Yeah.
John, do we have a spot for dirty soil if we need money for it?
No, all you have for that, Bob, it's not anticipated. There were borings done, and the hope, and we don't expect it.
There was for the fire station too.
Yeah.
Well, that was totally different.
Yeah, I mean, this spot in the back here, I'm going to be shocked if there's anything dirty back there. But for those, it's a good question though, because something like that comes up. That's what the contingency is for. That's what the project contingency is for. So any questions on this before I'm just going to jump over to the budget and kind of show you a couple things? No. Okay.
On the debris management, did they give an explanation of what their thinking is with that? Because the site contractor already owns the removal and disposal of all the existing vegetation, the topsoil that is.
So basically, they're making the site guy own, dumpsters and removal of that kind of stuff on site. So it's there's always going to be a dumpster on site. There's always going to be debris. There's going to be trash, and
so it's just not in general requirements.
Yeah, right. Correct. I think that they're having this guy deal with that.
Right. And Mike, the way that they separated it out, it seems as though they separated cleanup and general labor from inside the building footprint and outside the building footprint as well, because they have general labor and cleanup sprinkled throughout in other divisions.
Okay, so actually, let me just give me a second here. We'll go to the budget in just a minute. I want to. So again, this was their main sheet. So, I'll show you in a minute how this 12 million is reflected in the overall project budget. But just a minute here on this page, we had.
I sent this to the committee, moments before this meeting, just because.
Yeah, no problem. So when Commodore came on board, this was their first shake at the number, 11,686,943. and then the job gets bid, and some things change in the design from when they first, from 75%, to 100%. The market is what it is. But so where are the differences? Ultimately, the work would cost more, but then there's some other items that were added kind of down below the line. And just so people can see it, general conditions, we'll go back to that in a minute, but, general liability and property, it's their insurance, pre-construction costs, that's gone on a little bit longer than was expected. We expected if, we're already 2 months over and we have a very low rate from them right now on it. It's like $6,700 a month, or 68, something along those lines. They put money in this now for COVID-19 allowance, which is very prudent. They already had winter conditions in there, which is good. This is their CM contingency. So again, any of this money that doesn't get used during the project comes back. Similarly, this is the money that does get used if, as an example, they had a scope hold for beam penetrations of, as Brian said, of $5,000 and it costs 10, that 5 comes out of this bucket right here. So that's the CM contingency. I wish they called it CM contingency and not construction contingency because it's a little confusing. This is different than the one that I will show you in a minute that is kind of outside of their control. Again, this is our money. Also, too, as Brian just said, on one of the items, they resulted in a $1,900 bid savings. So they're going to drop that $1,900 once it's all signed into this number here. So we had a discussion with them and said, so when are you going to do your best and final? For the non-trade bidders, the guys that, let me back up. Trade bidders, whatever they bid, they bid. There is no room for negotiation. That's your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, painting, masonry, all of the things that would typically be filed subbidders, like you might remember from the fire station. You don't have any flexibility with those. But guys like this, the concrete, the steel, site work, they haven't done their final buyout of these guys yet. And at the end of the day, if let's say here for earthwork, they can get, again, it's already a pretty aggressive number. We know it. He's already very low. But let's say they can scrape $13,000 off of it and they buy that for $1.5 million even. What ultimately will happen is that $13,000 will drop into the CM contingency as bid savings. So we had a little bit of a concern because, let's say on the entirety of the project, they pick up $100,000. Mark and the trustees have committed to fund an additional $400,000 of this project, but we don't want to spend those monies if we've got monies within the CM contingency that remain untouched. The worst thing that can happen from a cash flow standpoint is, let's say at the end of the day, we spend none of this 365, but yet the trustees have to put up 400 grand to cover overages. And in the end, we give them back 400. It comes out of a different pocket. So ultimately, we want to make sure we're prudently checking on this construction contingency. And, let's say at the end of the day, they pick up $100,000 in buyout savings after we agree to this GMP next week, essentially making that contingency 465. We've said to them, look, we want to be able to have a discussion with you about bid savings coming back to the owner, coming back into the owner's side of the ledger and not have to wait till the end of the job. And Rich Luck from Commodore agreed and understands that money left in the CM contingency at the end of the job doesn't do you any good, especially if you have to not do other things because you don't have enough in your other contingency pocket, which we'll talk about in a second. So the good news is that they are willing to discuss and cooperate with us, which is great, which is what we want to hear. So that along the way, if they do a good job of buyout and there's extra money, we will have the opportunity to not wait to the end of the job, not wait the 14 months, and maybe after site work is done, say, hey, you picked up that 100 grand, that's 50 grand. How about, let's give you a change order for it now, and it comes back into the the owner's coffers to be accessible. Why is that important? And we'll talk about that next. And that is important because
John, just a quick question on the bid timing. Is there a chance that some of these numbers that were carried were bid pre-COVID, and now when we go after a final buyout, it's a different world post-COVID, and these contractors might be a little more aggressive, or are all these numbers kind of reflective of?
No, it's a great question. Obviously, I think that Brian, when did we got the bids on what date? Like March 8th?
So Brian P., we had our filed sub bids were opened on May 12th. We've actually reached out to some of the other disciplines where the numbers we really need them to hold their number. So they're able to hold their number. I think we said, John, I think it was the 25th of June is the number for the filed sub bids that they hold their number till.
Yeah, but that's that's not the question. The question is COVID. So Brian, I think the numbers, the trade bidders bid pre-COVID. We knew it was out there, but no shutdown had taken place. Right. The reality, I think, right now, when we talk about any savings and why it's important to put it back in that contingency, because that 50 grand that they have, let's say we as a community experience another spike in the fall, right as the building's getting closed in. It's at closed in, like right now until November, we've seen literally little to no impact on the job sites, with the exception of purchasing some masks, small dollars, no real monitoring, everybody's self-certifying. When we go inside, it's a different story. And that's where that 50 grand has every possibility of being spent, because, as soon as you have an enclosure and the windows are sealed, you're going to have some controls. So I will tell you that, the majority of this is pre-COVID, just because of the timing.
Yeah, my question was my concern was less about the 50 grand that they carried and more about just the timing of the bids and whether or not there could be a silver lining with the COVID that we might realize some savings kind of since the economy has changed.
Yeah, it's a good question. We have bid, since that, I've bid 2 school projects, or I should say 1 school project, with similar bid results to what you saw here. A little bit, we were a little below budget, but that was dead in the middle of COVID. So yep. I think there's, I don't think we didn't benefit, but we didn't get hurt. It's not like numbers have dropped off. I think the fear was they were going to go up, but that is being tempered in my mind by the fact that if you look at the central register right now, the opportunities coming forward are terrible. There's very, very few. So
demand is down.
Yeah, like Griffin was $100 grand low on electrical on a $800,000 package. We saw a similar issue, millions, at a zero to both on the other school job, because I think right now companies like them are, I'm not worried about COVID. I'm going to buy the work to keep my people busy, because opportunity for work, as Steve said, it's drying up a little bit, because until cities and towns can identify what the shortfall is and they know what the state aid deficit's going to be, you're not going to see a lot of newer projects. So I think if we had bid this 4 weeks later, I think the results would have been very similar, based on the small sample set we've seen so far. But just to the topic of project budget, just overall, and why these bid savings and these discussions about all of these other line items are important, is because this is kind of where we are right now. Obviously, the big orange number here is the GMP. It's over. So how did we get ourselves back in budget? Well, we had a 5% contingency that we've dropped to 3% right now. We still have the soft cost contingency below that. All of these other items below here are largely fixed. We were able to save a little bit here, a little bit. Sorry, it's not working here. a little bit on the e-bidding, which was good. So we carried 7,000. We think we're going to need a little less than 3. This is that QA/QC testing, just for reference for everybody. This is the, when we talk about all the people that have excluded that, that's the line item we have for that. We're targeting a lower, a more economical buyout of FF&E by about $40,000. We were able to take the signage money of 10 grand and confirm that that had been carried in the GMP up above. And all in, we're looking at a $15 million budget. Okay, so great, $15 million budget, but we had only previously approved 14.6. So this herein lies what we've been the hoops we've been jumping through the last couple of weeks. So thanks to Mark and the trustees have agreed to kick in the last $400,000 of the project. This is above and beyond the dollars that they had committed to the town previously as part of the original funding of the job. And that gets us to the 15 million. So as you can see, any opportunity that we have to save money within the GMP and move money back into, this contingency bucket so that we have it. And this is, to the question prior about what happens for dirty dirt, this is your bucket of money. Between hard and soft costs, you've got $476,000 for what ifs. And we'd like that, frankly, to be higher. It was a lot of work by Commodore, some back and forth with Phil to try to work this thing down and get us to where we are, and thanks to the trustees to be able to close the gap. And we are still far too early in the project to be able to say, typically we go through this and, we'll save some money on utility back charges. We'll save some money on telephones and all of the other owner purchases. And we'll probably save some money on more money on FF&E. But to just move money around right now to make everybody feel good isn't the thing to do. These are the numbers that are in the budget. We're going to live with them. The budget is, I'm not going to say tight, but it's close to tight. But, we're going to have to watch and be prudent. And we've been very, just like Commodore is open book with us, we're open book with them and saying, look, whatever, here's why. Let's say they save that $100,000 in buyout of their $12 million that we showed. I don't want them to hold on to that bid savings to the end. I want it back as soon as possible. And we're going to take it out of this number. So instead of 12,183, they become 12,083. And this 365 goes back up to 465, as opposed to waiting to the end of the job, getting a big chunk of money back and it doing no good to the town of Littleton to buy something else for the project or to cover other latent conditions that we don't know exist out there. I hope that wasn't too confusing. Does anybody have any questions about just the overall budget? And then I'm going to go back to one last conversation I had with Commodore about one particular line item. Okay. So the last comment we had is, as you can see, when we were kind of going through what changed between their first estimate, which was their first look at the job, the GMP in the second column, here's the delta. Obviously some of these things like the COVID, brand new, wasn't part of it when they joined us. It is now. So yeah, we support putting that in there, of course. This was kind of the number that jumped out at us. The general conditions jumped by $95,000. And we said, wait a minute, if you've already got down below here, your bonds carried, and some of these things fluctuate. With the more the job costs, your insurance cost goes up. That being said, they carried all of those things separately, and we said, this really looks kind of like a, this doesn't look good. What is this? Please explain. And Rich understood, the estimator didn't do a service to them. He said, look, the job is costing more, so theoretically the fee should reflect that. Yeah, okay, I'll give you that. If you had bid a $200,000 fee you know, based on 10 million, because this was the number, you know, that we gave them when we selected them. It's essentially 2%. 2% of 10,405,000 is a little bit more. Okay, so let's call that out. You know, so instead of calling this 200 grand and putting the delta just in this $95,000 bucket, let's call it out. Similarly, they said, look, you know, the job that's being presented is in our mind more complicated than what was originally shown. You know, some things have changed, the site work. We may have to give him a little more help in the field, you know, an additional superintendent for a period of time. I said, okay, that's fine too, but spell that out, you know, and maybe we don't want to buy that right now. You know, maybe that $95,000 delta, we drop it down, drop the money into the contingency. And if you tell me you need an additional super somewhere later on, yeah, we can have that conversation. But you didn't, you know, you just can't dump this kind of on us and say, here, this is an extra 100. You know, as I've said to Steve separately, Commodore took a really hard run at this job. Okay. Their pre-construction number of 34,250. My God, they've spent that, you know, they've probably spent double the 47 that they have, you know, right here. They probably spent double that number already. And I think ultimately, you know, they realized that maybe they went in a little too thin. Frankly, I don't care. That was part of the reason they were selected, but also, you know, we want to cooperate with them and, you know, have them working and looking out for us and all of that. And I think they will, but you just can't drop the $95,000 additional, you know, additional general conditions on us and expect that we're not going to question it. So, again, I bring that up just to show you kind of the other areas where we're hoping to pick up a little bit of money here and there. They're going to give us a response on this tomorrow. None of this is important to the decision to move ahead with those 3 packages tonight. It's just to keep you informed of where we are, kind of in the process. So, any. I'm sorry. The dogs are going nuts right now. I apologize.
You know, I'd like to just say something. I found this presentation very, very informative and helpful in terms of explaining the costs and the bid pieces here. And I actually like the language that you use, and I'm wondering how we make sure that we use that same kind of language when we talk to the Board of Selectmen, because there was a very a discussion at one of the Board of Selectmen meetings that were talking about using savings to add additional features to the bid, but the way you presented it here was much more clear in terms of trying to make sure that we have the budget line items and the moving around the money in order to be properly spent. None of it implied that we were adding extra features or amenities to the building or the project there, but more in terms of how we're managing the cost structure for it. So I'd like to make sure that Steve, as we have to engage, and Mark, I think he's still on the line there, engage with the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee as the project moves forward, and the continual back and forth about the cost of this project that's occurring.
No, Daryl, no, and I appreciate that very much. I mean, I think, you know, the plus of the CM at risk, you know, we joke about CM at no risk, but the reality is we will be living in this, you know, this set of numbers for, you know, for the next 14 plus a couple of months for closeout, 16 months. You know, on the fire station job, you got a 30-page requisition. On this job, you're going to get a 150-page requisition. You know, we're going to kill people with detail. And the reality is every one of these holds, every one of these allowances is going to be monitored on a day, like I said, a daily basis and a monthly basis. So we're not spending it if we don't need it. And ultimately, you know, this job was very important to Commodore. They took a run at it, I think, because they wanted to get into the library space. They wanted to get into, they do a lot of federal work, but this is, you know, an important municipal job for them. And you know, we also, you know, they come well regarded. as some of you may or may not know, we acquired Compass Project Management about 2 years ago now. A well-known OPM firm, bigger than us. We brought them into our company, and they've done a bunch of work with Commodore and have very good things to say about them. So as far as someone that will work with you, I was happy to hear Rich. Rich understands where we are. That was confirmed by the folks that have worked with them before in our own company. I think he understands, like we said, when we talk about this budget, it would be really great if next week when we present this number is a negative number down below. We show a bit of a surplus. Even if it's just perception, I'm hoping that we can squeeze a little bit more out of them before the GMP. Not to say we won't get more after GMP, but it would be great to be a little bit ahead of the game before we move, before we move into agreeing to the GMP next week.
What we'll do for project meetings too is we'll indicate where there's going to be some big milestones on the project where we can evaluate their construction contingency and to determine whether or not that can be shifted back over to the owner's coffers.
That's great. Terrific presentation. Any other questions?
So
There.
we don't have,
I have a question, Steve, if that's all right. Am I on?
Yep.
Oh, good. I tuned in late. I'm sorry about that. Did we talk about shared savings?
CM at risk as a public project, there is no such thing as shared. All savings is the owner's.
Okay. That's what I wanted
not allowed to do.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to hear.
Private job, yes, we certainly could set that up, but public work, nope. If it's saved, it's ours.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
And what we'll do is just, we'll make sure that those allowances and those holds are being done judiciously. If we start seeing a laborer on site who's, and again, it's small dollars, and Steve and I have had this discussion. If you start seeing somebody on site who's really not adding any value, maybe they've got a laborer on board who ultimately becomes very well utilized. But if you see 4 laborers on site that are just under these general allowance categories, well, we're going to call them out on it. I don't think it's going to be an issue, but we don't want to burn through those things for the sake of burning through them, And frankly, given the value of the fee that they charged, it really isn't in Commodore's interest to do extra work to make 2%. It's they are doing this job to make money and hopefully get out of here faster. If they get out of here faster, that's how they'll make more money, because they make that general conditions value, whether the job, if the job gets done in 13 months, that's a month of GCs that becomes profit. So, right. I think they're incentivized to get through this.
That's great, John. Thanks for the presentation. I'd like to, if there are no more questions, I'd like to bring this to a vote for the recommendations to award.
So, Steve, my only question is, if we recommend to award the items that we brought up and kind of asked for clarification or commented on, are those going to be, do we award now and then those items get picked up in the official change order as John suggested?
Absolutely, yes. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Like regarding your unit prices, Brian?
Yeah.
Regarding unit prices, and to be honest, Brian, my major concern is about penetrations on the concrete side more so than the steel.
Yeah. The other thing we'll want to do too, Brian, is to check and make sure that they may have made the subs own the penetrations. So if the plumber owns his and the HVAC owns his, if everybody owns them individually, then it's a lot less of a concern because they've had the sub trades deal with it.
Right.
Right.
Where I've gotten burned before on that, John, is, and I just want to make sure, I'm sure they're making the plumber own his own core drilling of the slab to put a pipe through. But if the concrete guy has to change his rebar layout and add rebar or add pour stop or edge stop around penetration, that's where you get concrete.
Good point. Okay.
Okay. Any more questions? Well, I'd like to have a motion to recommend award for the concrete in the amount of $882,000. Site work in the amount of 1 million. What is that? 300.
What? 1,513,163.
Okay, and then
structural steel in the amount of 668,400.
Correct. Okay. Do we have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Recommend. We have to do this by roll call. So state your name.
Bob Romley, yes.
Darrell Baker, yes. Darrell Baker second also, just in case I didn't hear a second.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Okay. All in favor?
Bob Romley, yes.
Richard Crowley, yes.
Darrell Baker, yes.
Mike Scaduto, yes.
Brian Pasquale, yes.
And Steve Moore, yes.
I think I actually get to vote on this one, so I will vote mine too. Mark Rambacher, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. And then one other order of business, since John brought it up and it's part of the agreement. The library trustees have committed to cover costs associated with the construction of the library in excess of $14,600,000. Therefore, the trustees have requested PMBC require prior to approval of any change order in excess of the $14,600,000 to be approved by the trustees before we vote on it, which I think is reasonable, and I'd like a motion to accept that.
Could you explain how that would work? Just like.
So in other words, you know, we want to spend the trustees' money last. So we go through all the contingency. We realize any savings from the construction or the CM contingency that we can pull out of the job, and then only after we exceed $14,600,000, exhausting all savings and contingencies within the project, then the trustees get to approve, even though they've committed, they get to approve the change orders prior to PMBC voting on them.
Let me ask a question. Is it change orders, or is it the last 400,000? Because we could have a change order next month, but the reality is from a cash flow standpoint, if let's say, you know, we also use the FF&E as kind of the example, the FF&E are going to be some of the last bills you're going to pay. So this sounds a little bit, you know, and I know we talked about it a number of different ways. As long as it's the last 400 grand, it could be covering a change order, or it could be covering an invoice for metal shelving for the library, you know?
Well, how do we reword that then? Any costs in excess of $14,600,000 would get prior approval by the trustees.
I think that's cleaner. Yep.
Yeah. So Steve, my only concern, and it's not to take the Board of Trustees out, is would it be better to pick something that's greater than $400,000, like the fit F&E? I assume that's a fit and furnish type of materials there, and allocate it specifically to one of those items, so that you can go back to them as a block for approval, rather than each incremental little change that may occur as we creep over into that 400,000?
Well, we had discussed that, but the problem with taking out individual item is that we allocate that specifically to the library. So let's just say we took out FF&E at $450,000, and we realized some savings in the total build out of the library, and we came in below the 14.6 minus the 450. The savings would go back to the town, but the library would be on the hook for all of the costs of the FF&E. So the library only wants to be on the hook for costs in excess of $14,600,000. Did I explain that right, Mark?
Yeah. So I also, for point of clarification, I've also been talking about with this to Steve Venuti, who's basically come up with a plan on how they're going to spend the funds allocated to this project. So their plan is to spend the library's funds last as well. So they're going to spend like the money they're bonding now will be spent first, and then the grant, and then the donations, and then the trust funds last. But the goal is basically, if the library donates, if we donate the $400,000 to this project and you don't spend it, it ends up going back into the general fund and not the library trust fund. So we don't want to take the money that we've earned from years of trust fund allocations and have it end up in the general fund. Basically, if we don't, well, we're willing to spend it if we need to, but we don't want to spend it if we don't have to. So, and I don't necessarily know that we need to improve, every dollar that is spent, but, if we knew what was coming, down the pike, we can vote at our meetings to authorize whatever to go forward. And it might be FF&E mainly that we're ending up spending this on. It's just but that would be more on timing and circumstance than anything else, I think, right?
And the way I see this is more of a formality anyway, because the trustees have agreed and will be putting money into an escrow account. So, I mean, it's kind of a fait accompli, but the trustees have asked that they get first bite at the apple on the approval process.
Yeah, no, I fully support all of that. It was just making sure that we didn't set up some kind of mechanics as final change orders come in. If change orders or expenses start coming in over the 14.6 or 14, whatever the number is there, that you're not having them to make emergency meetings in order to get approval so that you can continue to expend the funds, once you trip over that amount. There. And the way you worded it, it would be like every single item, once you exceeded 14.6, needs individual approval. And that seems like it will be very awkward and time consuming, particularly if we get off cycle on some kind of meeting or anything.
Can I make a suggestion? Hey, Steve?
Yeah.
Am I still on? All right. Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
On the contingency, we word this thing so that the last 400 of contingency is the 400 that they would have, the library trustees would have a chance to speak on, because any change orders are going to come from contingency. And this way, you can use up your contingency, because it'll be plus and minus until we're through with our buyout. But whatever's left for contingency will be used for change orders, and we reserve the last 400 of that for the library, for the trustees to sit in on. That way, it doesn't.
We're talking about two different buckets of money. Contingency is already built into the budget, and the trustees' 400,000 is outside the budget.
Correct, but they want if we're exceeding the 14, they want to have they want to have some say in the matter. Now, the change orders would come from the contingency. Oh, I see what you're saying about their money We see the thing I'm trying to drive to is that the change orders are going to come out of the contingency, any change orders we have. And so, you know, FF&E is a protected item. They shouldn't have anything to do with FF&E. If there's a change, it has to be within the last, it's got to be something out of the contingency, because that's where our change order money comes from.
But Rich, it's more of a cash flow issue, because let's say, for example, we hit a ton of ledge. We could spend the whole contingency on ledge in the first 3 months of the job, and then if we burn through it all at the end, we're going to need that money for furniture. So if we call it just contingency, I know I know where you're coming from, because at the end of the day, it ends up being one pail of money that if we need it, if that pail runs dry, we're going to pour it in from another. But I think having the flexibility to use it for whatever's lost, whether it be something for contingency or phones or FF&E, you know, it's all library expenses. You know, to Darrell's point, you know, not having to go to the trustees to approve a change order, you know, to me, this is much easier done getting them to approve a PO for a couple $100,000 for shelving and $100,000 for that. They're approving a couple of big things as opposed to contingency monies for change orders, unless we look at it as kind of a block. Guys, we're running low. We need you to authorize $100,000 and to move into the contingency. I mean, I can see it. Both ways, but I think giving yourselves the greatest latitude is the most important thing here.
I want to divorce contingency from escrow. So I'm going to reword the motion and say that the PMBC would give the trustees first vote on any monies that would be covered by escrow monies before the PMBC approves them.
I second that.
That's a good call.
All in favor, roll call.
Bob Romley, yes.
Richard Crowley, yes.
Mike Scaduto, yes.
Brian Pasquale, yes.
Darrell
Baker, yes.
Steve Moore, yes. Motion carries. So that concludes the items for tonight. Any member input? So let me just say that next week we're anticipating voting on the GMP. We had a meeting with Commodore earlier this evening. They indicated that they would have their spreadsheet into Vertex, John, Monday or Tuesday next week?
So they're going to tell us tomorrow, but they understand that we're hoping to get it sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
With a Wednesday meeting, to be able to have it most of the day Tuesday would be great. So I'm hopeful that by Monday afternoon they have it for us. It's not going to change much from the GMP backup they've given us already, because frankly, it's not all bought out. They have the trade contractors now, which is great. Those numbers are already in there, but there's still a bunch of things they won't have bought out. But we will be committing to that number, and it will only go down from next Wednesday's authorization to when it finally becomes a change order. But as Brian said, or I think right on the last call, is we're not going to see the savings until they get a little bit deeper into this. And again, we're gonna have regular meetings with them every week. And we will have separate, kind of requisition meetings, and we'll be tracking all of that. So trust me, as soon as we think we have the ability to grab some savings back, we will, to replenish some of the coffers that have been a little bit cut. And I think Commodore understands where we are, and we'll support that.
Yeah, the only changes I would expect in the next GMP that comes to us either Friday or Monday would be the tweaks to the general conditions that we spoke about, possible tweak to their fee, And then they've also put their assumptions and qualifications together with that GMP that Johnson and Roberts is putting some questions together just to firm up the GMP for Monday.
Yeah, and not to keep revisiting this, but I did notice in the breakdown there's still 125,000 in for the fire road. I've never seen a breakdown on that. That was a plug number that we put in. I have a feeling that there's some ability to get some savings out of that.
Where do you see that?
It's in
Fourth line down.
It's in the GMP.
Yeah. Fourth or fifth line down.
You know, just something to look at.
Okay.
Because the original budget or the original estimate was in the Brian. You and I talked about this, and the original budget was around 40 grand. And then we agreed to bump it up to 125 because we thought 140, or we thought 40 grand was too low. So that was an arbitrary number we came up with.
But that number should be carried in Cataldo's overall scope at this point.
Okay.
Which is in earthwork.
I saw it as a separate line item, but you know.
No, but that in their GMP or on my budget sheet.
On your budget sheet.
Yeah, that was on the old
because
one.
I'm showing you the historical development of the budget. So now all of those construction items are now in that 12 million. So even if the fire road completely went away, your GMP to build the building is still 12.1. You know what I mean? So there's no more savings from that line item, unfortunately.
Okay, so that's in Cataldo's. Okay.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
So Joe, when does the Board of Selectmen meet again? Is it on the 15th?
We scheduled a special meeting actually on Monday. The agenda hasn't been posted yet. The next meeting is June 29th. Next scheduled. So if there's something that we need to get in front of the Board of Selectmen, I'll have to ask the chair tomorrow when I'm in before we post for Monday.
Can we put a placeholder in there for a, potential GMP presentation?
Okay.
I mean, I think I think it would be a good courtesy to give the BOS that kind of information.
Yeah.
But like you said with Nina, Steve, that's basically kind of just a courtesy at that point.
Yeah, we can issue the NTP without going to the BOS.
Okay.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Bob Romley, yes.
Richard Crowley, yes.
Scuduto, yes.
Brian Pasquale, yes.
Daryl doesn't want to leave, I guess.
Oh, I did first. Daryl Baker, yes.
Okay. Steve Moore, yes. And John and Brian, thanks so much for a great presentation. Really appreciate it. And, thanks for all the great questions. It was a really helpful meeting.
All right.
All right, guys. Have a good evening. We'll see you soon.
Night.
Night all.
Okay.
Bye-bye. All right. Good night.
Night.